Hi, and welcome to the third installment of our notes on globalization. Here we're going to be talking about crime and terrorism to start out with. This is one area or two areas where globalization, the increased interaction and integration of people across the world, has had a big impact. Identity theft, other kinds of password theft, all that stuff is a really big problem. You've probably gotten emails from people saying that you're the cousin of a prince who's lost his kingdom and so on and so on. If you just tell them your bank account number, you'll be rich very quickly. Word to the wise, don't respond to that. That's probably from Nigeria, actually. That's kind of the hotbed of that kind of scam. If you get an email talking about the very nice, very beautiful Russian woman who wants to meet you and so on, don't respond to that either. Russia also has a pretty bad reputation in terms of being a hub of internet scams. But good old US of A is not far behind. If you get stuff like this, don't respond. These are just very much global companies, I guess you could almost say, that prey on people who click on things. So don't click on things. Drug cartels move either the raw materials of the drug trade, things like poppy and cocoa leaf, from less developed places, like say South and Southeast Asia for poppy seed, or usually South America for cocoa leaf. The drug cartels, which are very, very well integrated, very impressive from a business standpoint, which is not to say they're good, move these raw materials and refine them into saleable drugs, which they then send to more wealthy markets, especially Western Europe, the U.S., to some extent Australia. And interestingly, these modern drug traffickers take very much advantage of modern ways of transport and communication and all that. But in a lot of ways, this is kind of like a repeat of previous eras of globalization. For instance, when the British were a major imperial power, they would, on ships, get opium, which was generally grown in South Asia, which was then India, then Imperial India, controlled by Great Britain, and they would force Chinese people to buy it, or force the Chinese government to allow them to sell it there. So I guess the idea of drug cartels may have changed over the years, but it's not necessarily an entirely new phenomenon. The trade of guns and diamonds is another way that globalization has really affected the world in terms of illegal activities. Now, blood diamonds, those are the name for diamonds that are mined in really bad circumstances, usually or very often in war zones, by slave labor that's basically forced at gunpoint to work in mines. And those diamonds then are traded. They're controlled by rebel groups and warlords, that kind of thing. And then the diamonds are illegally traded for illegal guns, because when you've got one illegal good, it's the easiest thing to trade it for is a different illegal good. And if a lot of the blood diamonds come from conflict zones in the past, Sierra Leone, which was undergoing a horrible civil war, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is continuing to be in a really bad bad military conflict, and so the diamonds would come from there. They would be taken to European centers of processing, like Belgium, say, like London, and they would be swapped usually for Eastern European illegal guns and other military equipment. A lot of it coming from Ukraine, Bulgaria, the other former countries of the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc. And then those illegal guns would go to feed and support the rebel groups or whoever was doing the fighting in the area where the diamond mines were. So it was kind of a self-perpetuating system. And even though, let's say one one conflict is no longer there, like the one in Sierra Leone, another conflict is going to pop up. So this is one of those examples of globalization that goes on and on. You have, with globalization, the spread of power of terrorist groups, like take Al-Qaeda, take ISIS, which is kind of a terrorist group turned into a semi-state. These groups, they recruit people from all around the world. They fundraise so they can buy weaponry, and they attack all over the globe. What you're looking at here is a map of where foreign fighters who are fighting for ISIS in Syria and Iraq, where they come from. So you can see there are a huge number of ISIS fighters from Saudi Arabia, very many from Tunisia, a lot from France, a lot from Morocco, or is that Western Sahara that's on? I can't tell. A very large number from Russia, a decent amount from Australia, Britain, Germany, and they're all coming here. Kind of pretty scary. Pretty scary stuff. Canada has a decent number, so does the U.S., so it's definitely a global phenomenon. There's been a lot of talk in the U.S. about seizing the passports of people who are thought to be going to join ISIS. I'm not sure whether that's going to happen or not, but people are subject to potential arrest if it's clear they're going to join what's described as a terrorist organization. I think a lot of the time what people are worried about in the U.S., say, or in Germany, is not that, say, some American will go to Syria or Iraq and get blown up fighting for ISIS, but that he will survive it and come back to the U.S. and do something. So this is a very globalized type of violence that is somewhat new. Finally, our last area that we're going to talk about, where you can kind of see serious examples of globalization, is health and disease. Viruses like AIDS, like Ebola, like SARS, which was a really nasty flu-like virus that has bubbled up occasionally over the last 10 or 15 years. These viruses spread on transcontinental flights, which really helps them get from one place to the other, and something that was not necessarily available many years ago. For instance, SARS, which has a fairly short incubation period. If you had, and SARS originally, in the first outbreak in around 2002, 2003, was centered around Hong Kong. But it spread to places like the U.S. And the European countries and a lot of other places. It spread there over these large transoceanic flights or transcontinental flights. That if the person who was sick had to take, say, a ship from Hong Kong to Los Angeles, that person would have probably died by the time they got there, and so the disease would have had less a chance of spreading. Now, SARS, in some ways, not as scary as Ebola because it only has about a 10% rate of death. At the same time, it's spread in the air, so you can sneeze it or cough it, and somebody else can breathe it in, and they'll get it. So when you say it has a 10%, you have a 10% chance of death when you get it, it might be a little scarier because it's not like you can just avoid touching things. You kind of have to avoid breathing to avoid getting it. So SARS is really quite scary. You know all about Ebola and how it's being spread by people flying here and there. Just a day or two ago, they found a new guy in New York who has Ebola, who had gone to West Africa to help contain the disease. And AIDS, about 30 years ago, one of the people who really spread AIDS all around the U.S. is now believed to have been a flight attendant who was, I guess, went to a lot of cities and made a lot of friends, I guess you could say. Other ways that health and disease have changed due to globalization is the idea of diets. Diets, what people eat, have also been Americanized along with culture. You see the spread of McDonald's all over the place. You see people discarding their kind of the way their ancestors ate, and eating a lot more like Americans now. So eating a lot more kind of white starches, eating a lot more sodas, eating a lot more desserts, eating a lot more red meat, all the things that, in great quantities are not so good for you. So now the health problems that Americans have, kind of been number one in the world about getting very quickly are spreading to other countries in the world. And what you see right here is a prediction of rates of diabetes in about 10 years. So you can see that even though the U.S. was kind of at the head of the pack in terms of having high rates of diabetes, other countries that are adopting eating patterns or exercise patterns, by which I mean like patterns of not exercising, that Americans kind of developed first, other people are catching up and going to have a lot of problems in terms of this kind of diet-related health issues. And finally, maybe kind of somewhat in response to that, maybe in response to the spread of shipping and the internet, there are now international pharmacies. So if you do get diabetes in, say, I don't know, Peru, you can call up an international pharmacy on the internet, order, I guess you decide what disease you have, and you order up your diabetes medicines, and the internet will ship them to you through FedEx or whatever the Peruvian equivalent of FedEx is, for pretty cheap. So it's kind of weird. In some ways, the problem of health problems are becoming globalized, but also health solutions are becoming globalized. Of course, at the same time, the spread of international pharmacies that will ship to you basically whatever legal drug you want can be considered its own problem. So we'll leave you with that paradox. Good job, and I'll see you in class.